I'm not stupid, except when it comes to women. I know. I know. In fact, aren't most men dumb when it comes to women? I know some of us think they know about them, that they understand them, but are they really? My guess is no. Like most men, I'm just trying to figure it out and do it as right as I can. Having said that, I guess that's the reason it took me so long to realize that I'm really dumb when it comes to women, and my wife in particular. I saw signs of her disrespect and cheating for almost 5 months before I decided that if there was smoke, there might just be a fire I needed to put out. As the old song goes, we were married in a fever hotter than a pepper sprout. I found Catherine, courted her, and married her within 1 year of college. I was attending Oklahoma State University in Stillwater as a party management major when she randomly came into my life. Okay, my real specialty was hotel and restaurant management. Partying was what I was doing when I should have been studying. I also worked as a bouncer at Eskimo Joe's, well known and popular in college. The bouncers would take turns at different posts in the building to do their jobs. We served visitors at the door, checking IDs and wading through the crowd to make sure nothing objectionable happened. The bar had an upper floor, and one of us was always on duty at the top of the stairs to make sure drunks didn't fall down the stairs. While I was working there, I quickly gained an understanding of the female members of the bar. I learned which ones would fit and which ones wouldn't, and which ones would sometimes fit, and how to identify each one. When I took up my post at the top of the stairs, I had a view of most of the lower floor. I watched from my post on the balcony as the women processed the dumb bastards on the first floor. Some of the women had 2 or 3 poor dumb bastards buying them drinks at the same time in hopes of driving them home or to their cars for some privacy later in the evening. Many young ladies begged drinks from the dumb men just before closing time. There was usually a mass exodus of these women after last call, or a little before. They would pretend to go to the restroom before leaving with the young man who had treated them during the evening to let them pop out the back door that led from the hallway to the restrooms. This, of course, pissed the men off, and many times one of the bouncers had to give them advice to calm them down. I knew which young women played this game regularly, and as a public servant, I would warn my friends and sometimes just a guy I thought was cute and didn't deserve to have nasty things said about him. Others I just let get carried away. Anyway, one Saturday night after a home game, I was working and watching drunks make fools of themselves when this absolute goddess fell into my arms. Drunk was putting it mildly for her. She was completely out of it and claimed she didn't even know where she was. She couldn't find the girlfriends she supposedly came with, but I figured it out. I'd never seen her with these women before, and they were one of the worst groups to sneak out the back door after drinking for free all night. I was pretty sure they were gone. It was after last call, and they usually ran out when last call was announced. About this time, as Catherine was literally hanging in my arms, the man she was begging for drinks from came over. He looked at me fiercely and grabbed her arm. "Come on, Kelly," he said. "We need to get out of here. I was beginning to think you disappeared because of me." Well, now I think I know her name. I was about to let her go with the young man when she came to her senses and looked at him questioningly. "My name isn't Kelly, it's Catherine. Who are you? Why do I have to go with you? Where are Cindy and the other girls? I was supposed to go with them when the bar closed." The man just pulled her by the arm and said, "Kelly, Catherine, whatever. I've been buying you drinks all night long, and now you're coming home with me." Catherine came to her senses again and tried to stand up and pull away from the man. She looked scared and said, "No, I don't know you, and I don't want to go with you. Now leave me alone." The man tried to pull her away again, but she resisted. I figured she really didn't know him and didn't want to leave, so I pulled her over to a chair and tried to get between them. "Hey, kid," I said. "Looks like the lady doesn't want to go with you. Now why don't you just leave like she asked before we get in trouble?" A mask of hatred appeared on his face, and he shoved me. "Back off, asshole. This bitch is with me, and we're leaving. Now leave it alone if you know what's best for you." I pulled back a little, then grabbed his arm, and with a swift movement pinned it behind his back. He cried out in pain as one of my fellow bouncers approached. "You got a problem, Dave?" "Nah. This guy wanted to take the lady with him, but she didn't want to go. He didn't want to take no for an answer, but I think he understands now. Don't you?" Having said that, I pulled the jerk's arm up a little more, and he howled in pain again and lifted himself up on his tiptoes. "Oh, yeah, I get it. Just let me go, asshole. I walked the man to the door and out to the edge of the sidewalk. I gave him a little nudge and said, "All right, get out of here, buddy. We have your picture now, so I don't want any more trouble from you, or we'll have to call security next time." I walked back into the building and saw a couple of waitresses crowded around Catherine. She passed out right in her chair. Damn, that's what I was thinking. Patty looked at me and said, "Dave, Catherine lives in my dorm. If you help me get her back to the dorm and put her in her room, I can take care of her from there." Well, that's what I did, and that's how I became one of Catherine's favorite people. The following weekend, I was working on a Friday night when a beautiful woman jumped up to me, wrapped her arms around me, and pulled me against her before imprinting a very careless and long kiss on my lips. I pushed her away and said, "Wow, what's this all about? You saved me last Saturday. Patty told me you stopped that asshole from driving me home. Then you drove us back to the dorm and helped her get me into my room. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't saved me. I didn't even know that he and my dork friends had done the old trick of drinking and running out the back door at last call without me. I was supposed to go with them, but they wouldn't wait for me and just left. I didn't even hear them call for the last time, so I missed it. Well, for the next 2 years when I was working, Catherine was always there to protect me. We got to know each other very well and started dating a few months after I rescued her. When we graduated, we got married. Catherine is just a little demanding. She loves parties and dancing, likes to eat good food and drink good wine. It's all good. We have a great job and no kids, so we can afford it. We just can't afford as much as she wants right now, and it pisses her off when I tell her we can't go out before payday. Some of our arguments about money revolve around the fact that my parents are pretty wealthy. They own a large farming operation and almost 4 parcels of farmland in our hometown. We also have a large year-round resort for fishing and hunting. When I tell Catherine that we can't afford something, she almost always yells that if I wasn't such an idiot, I would have gotten it from my parents. She thinks I should come home and take a management position with my dad so we can make a lot of money and be a big duck in a little puddle. I have told her repeatedly that I am here at this job to get some real-world experience and learn how the big boys do it before I go back to our company. The resort manager plans to retire in another 3 years, at which time I will take his place. That's not fast enough for Catherine. I started getting snide comments about my ability to earn enough to pay our bills. Sometimes Catherine would go out after work with her girlfriends and come home broke. Many times over the past few months I had to pick her up or pay for a cab. About 5 months ago, all that stopped. Oh, she still came home agitated, and many times I had to go with her to the office the next day to pick up her car. Sometimes I had to take her to her favorite bar to pick it up, but I never had to pay off the cab driver or pick her up. Once or twice I found her asleep on the living room floor when I came downstairs the next morning. I wondered how she got into the house if she passed out on the floor outside the door. Finally, after some arguing, I decided to find out what was really going on. I did what many men do in a similar situation. I bought voice recorders and put them in Catherine's purse, in her car, and even one in her office hidden under her desk. I tapped our landline and bought the necessary equipment to copy her cell phone calls. What I found out killed my love for her. She was having an affair with one of the men she worked with. Many late nights and Saturday shopping trips with the girls over the past 5 months were her liaisons with good old Gregory Anders. He was one of those obnoxious salesmen you hate. Greg was arrogant. He had an ingratiating smile and he sucked up to his betters. His only saving grace, or maybe not, was that not only was he the highest paid salesman in her company, but his father owned the damn place. I had enough notes to realize 2 things. When I cut back on our visits to expensive restaurants, cut back on entertaining, buying fine wines, going to expensive plays, and so on, Catherine complained long and loudly at work about how badly I was treating her. Gregory noticed that Catherine was unhappy and began following the women on their night outings. He spent money, bought them drinks, and generally showed them the good life until he got Catherine interested. After that, he managed to talk her into meeting him for lunch at an expensive bistro. After she was hooked by his extravagance, he invited her to dine after work at fancy establishments. After a few weeks, Catherine succumbed to his seduction and began spending time in bed with Gregory. He started giving her orders, and to my shock, she followed them. All he had to do was threaten to end his generosity, and she complied with his demands. Sex in a restaurant bathroom? Okay, suit yourself, sweetie. I even had tapes of him telling her to cut back on the amount of sex we were having because he didn't want my sloppy seconds. He told her she had to make sure it was more than 24 hours from the time she slept with me to the time she slept with him, or he would dump her. He said, "I refuse to have sex with my woman after she has been with someone worse. I don't care how you do it, but you have to make sure you are clean before you come to me." Our sex life quickly went downhill and revolved around good old Gregory's trips out of town on sales and Sundays. He was never with her on Sundays, so that quickly became my only guaranteed day of lovemaking. I have to admit that I really didn't care after I found out what was going on. I kept that cheating bitch around as long as I could only because I was getting ready to get a divorce. Luckily, we had only been married for about 27 months and didn't have kids yet when I found out about good old Greg and Kate. She hates being called Kate, so that's how I think of her now. We rented a pretty nice apartment and bought 2 new cars. She had to have a BMW, of course. I was very happy with my 2010 F-150 Super Crew 4X4, which I bought new when we graduated from college. When we went somewhere, she refused to go in that darn old truck and insisted we go in her car. Of course, we rarely go anywhere together now. I just do enough with her to keep her in the dark. Today begins my revenge on Kate and Greg. She has a date with him for tonight. She plans to meet him at the mall at 6:30 p.m. They are going out for drinks and then dinner at a new French restaurant. Afterward, they are going dancing. She tells me she is going with the girls to a baby shower. Kate got out of the shower at 5:30 and started getting dressed. She was ready to leave at 6. That would be just enough time for her to get to the mall and meet Greg. I waited in the hallway by our bedroom door until she came out. I burst into the room and enclosed her in a hug. I kissed her and started rubbing her. "Damn it, Dave, stop it. You know I have to meet the girls at 6:30 p.m. I don't have time for that, and besides, you'll ruin my makeup." "I'm sorry, sweetie, I just need you so badly. How about we do a quickie now and then have a good fuck when you get home?" "No, I don't have time, Dave." I pushed her back until her feet hit the edge of the bed. I already knew she was wearing thigh-length stockings and bikini panties. When her feet touched the bed, she fell backwards and I thrust over her. I kissed her and pulled away. She screamed about how I had ruined her makeup and that now I had soiled her. She headed to the bathroom to clean herself up, but I grabbed her and dragged her to the door and down the hall. As we passed the table where she kept her purse, I picked it up and held it out to her. "I'm sorry it took so long, sweetheart," I said. "I really needed it, though. Thank you. Here's your purse. If you hurry, you can still make it and not be late. Say hi to the girls for me. You can blame me for making you late. Tell them I apologize." "But I need to get cleaned up. I can't go into town looking like this." "No, you're fine, sweetheart. We used to do that a lot, remember? No one will ever know. Now go out and have fun, baby." Catherine looked at me angrily and turned to her car. It was all I could do not to laugh. I sat there waiting for the tape to see what the asshole was thinking about getting my wife that night. Oh, guys, he was pissed at Kate. I could hear them kissing and moaning as they entered his apartment. There were a lot of rustling noises. Then I heard Kate say, "Greg, honey, I'm sorry, but Dave made me make love to him before I left. Let me go and clean up before we go to bed." "What?" "I told you to keep that little asshole away from you when I'm going to be with you." I heard a spanking and Kate screamed, "Now get your ass into the bathroom and clean yourself up." I couldn't hear anything else because Kate had obviously left her purse in the living room and they were sleeping in the bedroom, but inside I was happy. I'd pissed off old Greggy and from the sound of it probably slapped Kate. I didn't see a bruise, so I assumed he had just slapped her. The next 2 times I knew Kate was going to be with Greg, I forced her to sleep with me. In fact, every time she left the house, I tried to leave a charge in her in case she was actually going to meet Greg instead of doing the innocent thing I was told she was going to do. Greg was getting angrier and angrier because Kate kept coming to him after me. He called her a cheater and other horrible names. Almost every time she cried before he roughly took her, it was so awesome. I fucked her and she left the house crying in fear of Greg. Then he was rough with her and yelled at her and she cried even more. As far as I know, he didn't hit her again after that first time, and I suspect it was just a slap on the butt. The last time she was with Greg was bad, though. I'd had enough and decided my revenge was over. I had arranged everything to hand her the divorce papers during her Saturday night date. I even supplied Greg's wife with copies of the records and photos I had. No, I didn't have pictures of them doing dirty deeds, just of them having dinner, dancing, and kissing in his car. That was enough. I paid extra for Kate to be served after she and Greg got to his apartment in the city. It was actually an apartment rented by his father's company for corporate visitors. Greg and his father both used it for their liaisons with women they weren't married to. Oh yeah, I was also kind enough to send Greg's mother pictures of his father and his secretary having sex too. Heck, why not be a nice guy? The maintenance man met Greg and Kate in the lobby of the condominium. After he served her, he handed Greg the letter I had prepared for him. The process server said to Greg, "I have been instructed to give you this letter, Mr. Anders. Mr. Stevens has outlined his actions to you so that you know what has been going on over the past few months and what you can expect the next time you come home." In the letter, I explained the documents I had against him and Kate and that I had provided them to his mother and his wife. I also asked him if he liked getting my leftovers from Kate. I told him that I made sure that every time she came to see him, I sent him a piece of me to play with. I'm afraid Greg got so angry that he hit Kate. He managed to hit her twice before the guard grabbed him and dragged him away. I heard that, and I heard the guard call the police and an ambulance for Kate. I felt sick to my stomach. Yes, I wanted to hurt Kate, but I didn't want her to get hurt physically. I just didn't know that Greg would actually try to beat her up. About an hour later, I got a call from the hospital. They wanted me to come over, do some paperwork, and bring Kate home. I laughed and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't do that. Kate and I are getting a divorce and she doesn't live with me. Why don't you call her lover and ask him to pick her up?" "Oh, well, I guess I can do that. What's his name?" I gave her Greg's name and phone number. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Sir, I'm sorry, but I can't call Mr. Anders. Your wife is in the emergency room because Mr. Anders beat her badly this evening. I believe he's in jail right now, sir." "Okay, here are 2 more phone numbers. Maybe one of them can help." I gave the phone numbers of Kate's parents and one of her 2 best friends. I don't know who picked her up. I haven't heard from her in almost 4 days. Wednesday night, I left work and found Kate waiting for me at my truck. When she saw me, she slowly got out of her truck and walked over to me. Kate had tears in her eyes as she stopped in front of me. "David, honey," she said, "can we please talk about everything? Please?" "No, Kate, there's not much to talk about. You cheated and I caught you. Now we're getting divorced," I said. "But I don't want a divorce, Dave. Can't we just get it over with? I have nowhere to go. Please. I need to go home, Dave. I promise I'll feel better if you just let me come home and let me make it up to you." "No, that's not going to happen, baby. I heard Greggy had to move into your little love nest. Why don't you move in with him and his daddy? I bet they'd be happy to take care of you." I walked around Kate and got into my truck. When I closed the door, she stood there crying. She didn't move until I was out of sight. Now here was another thing I didn't understand about women. Kate worked full-time and made almost $36,000 a year. Why didn't she have enough money to rent a place like I did? Why did she move into that damn apartment with Greg and his father? I don't know. What I found out from the police report is that Greg and his father beat her so badly that she died after 3 days in the hospital. She apparently pissed them off when she refused to let them have her alone. She thought she was Greg's mistress, and they would get married after the divorce, according to the statement she gave to the police before she died. Now I really feel like shit. Kate ruined our marriage in search of the good life. I killed Kate with my stupid revenge. I looked up and said, "Bartender, give me another. We gotta get this shit over with." I was floating and the world was spinning, and then a goddamn mule kicked me in the head. There were dozens of people standing over me. I peeked under the goddess's short skirt. She looked down at me. Her face reflected shock, and she fell to her knees beside me. "David, is that really you? Why the hell were you so drunk you fell off your bar stool?" "Patty?" "Yeah, Dave. I'd ask how you're doing, but I don't think you're in any condition to tell me. Let's get you up and see if we can sober you up a little." Patty and one of the bouncers helped me to her cubicle. She gave me coffee. I ran to the bathroom twice to get rid of the coffee and most of my insides. God, I'm glad I don't have to clean up after myself. After a couple hours, I was at least able to talk without too much trouble. Patty demanded an explanation of what I was doing there so drunk. I told her the whole story you just read and said, "So, you see, Patty, I killed her. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I hated her for what she did to me, but I didn't want her dead." Patty sat there in shock. She stared at me with her mouth open, Finally, she put her arm around me and hugged me tightly. Dave, some of what you did was pretty mean, but you did not kill her. That asshole Greg killed her. You couldn't have known he would do it. Patty sat staring off into the distance for a while, then said, You know, Dave, it's partly my fault. I regret now that I never told you about Catherine while we were in college. Even after you started dating, she had her eye on guys. If they had a lot of money or very little and were willing to spend it on her, she would screw them. Often on nights when she wasn't spending time with you at the Joe's, she'd go out with some guy with deep pockets. Where do you think she got the money for those expensive clothes she wore? I never told you because you weren't exceptional back then. And I really didn't think you'd fall for her tricks and marry her. Heck, you worked at Joe's and knew what kind of tramps walked around there. I thought you were only after her for her figure like the other guys. So, you see, I'm kind of to blame too. I was sitting there looking at Patty. Even in college, right? Damn, I just don't understand women. I thought we were doing so well. Dave, don't paint all women with the same brush. You know, a lot of us aren't like that. If you use that criteria, I guess I should run away from you because all men are like Gregory, right? Dave, I know that's not true. I've worked with you for 2 years. I know what kind of man you are. How many women have you brought home and put to bed when they were so drunk they could have been raped if someone hadn't taken care of them? Dave, you just need to internalize that women are like men. There are good, decent players, and there are not. There are women players just like there are men. Look for the good ones and do your best. We reason differently than men, it's true, and we're guided more by emotion. But it's not that hard to understand, is it? Patty smiled and pulled my hand. Come on, Dave. Let me take you home. By the way, where do you live? If you're really interested in learning something about women, when all this settles down, I'll give you some lessons on how to understand them, okay? Patrick sat in his favorite chair, the same one he'd been sitting in for the past 5 years. It was a Christmas present from his ex-wife. Who gives a recliner as a Christmas present? But she knew him well. She knew him well enough to realize that this chair would be the perfect gift for him, even if it was a silly gift for someone else. It was so comfortable, like it had been made especially for him. The cup holders were perfect for holding whatever he was drinking. The Bluetooth speakers on either side of the headrest made him feel like he was bathing in sound. And many nights in a row he fell asleep on it with his feet up. This chair was the only thing he had left from his past life. His daughter lived with her in the house he was kicked out of, living with the dog he had bought her as a Christmas present. A dog that was mostly walked, bathed, and fed by him. All she did was cuddle him to her. He sighed. His first Christmas alone, just him and his chair. His cell phone rang. When he saw who was calling him, a perplexed expression appeared on his face. Throwing a quick glance at the clock on the opposite wall, he saw the final minutes of the longest Christmas Eve he had ever experienced. Should he even answer it? He could just let the call go to voicemail. But a curious, masochistic part of him was drawn to the call. It was the kind of scab that was impossible not to pick. "Hi, Kendra," he said, picking up the phone. "Hi, Patty." She still had the same sadness in her voice that she'd always had lately when they'd talked, and yet it was mixed with the sweetness he'd always known. For a moment there was silence between them, but it was not empty. It was filled with 15 years of memories, both happy and sad. Patrick finally interrupted it with words. "I honestly didn't expect to hear from you this year." "Why not?" she asked quietly. "We promised to always be the first to wish each other Merry Christmas, no matter what. Do you remember?" He grinned at that. "Because keeping promises is your business, right?" "Patrick." "You're right. My fault. The water under the bridge." They paused again, giving her a chance to accept his apology. This time she spoke first. "So, do you have any plans for tomorrow?" "Not really. other than to give Jessie her present when you bring her over tomorrow and have dinner at my parents' house. What about you? Nothing, really, she said, even though they both knew it was a lie. Patrick thought about leaving it unanswered, but he couldn't help himself. Those damn scabs. So you're not doing anything about... what's his name? She sighed. Hearing him mention her boyfriend, even though he didn't give his name, was like pouring a bucket of ice water on her. You mean Sean? She asked, completing his tactical throw at her. Yes, Sean. He tried, but couldn't hide the bitterness in his voice. Just saying that asshole's name made him need a heartburn pill. Patrick couldn't help but relive the moment all over again. In fact, it was more than a moment. An entire hour had passed. A whole hour of reading those fucking texts and detailing her 2-year affair. Each one ripped more and more chunks out of his heart. By the end, all that was left was an empty hole in the middle of his chest. Kendra sighed sadly. Well, if you must know, we're going to his parents' house when we drop Jessie off. How original. A tear rolled down Kendra's cheek. Patrick couldn't see it, of course. Not from his side of the phone, though he probably wouldn't have noticed either if she'd been standing right in front of him. He was busy feeling his own confusion. Pouncing on him, Kendra spat out, I don't know why you're so angry. You don't care either way. After all, you're the one who dumped me, remember? That only made him laugh out loud. The way she always managed to turn everything upside down was her gift. If she had a superpower, it would be projecting her subjective experiences onto other people, and not that astral projection, which would actually be a cool power. No, hers was just good old-fashioned projection, not taking responsibility for anything. What's so funny? She asked angrily. Why don't you ever take me seriously? Because you're full of shit, Kendra. That's why. I'm full of shit? I'm full of shit? Yes, he said, still sounding a little surprised. I'm the one who dumped you? Really? So, the 2-year affair had nothing to do with it? All those times you sat next to me, watched movies with me, but texting him had nothing to do with it? That fucking 3-day weekend that you, flew out to take care of your sick mother. I get it! She shouted in his ear, interrupting his tirade. She was right to do so because he had plenty more ammunition. Really, Kendra? Did you really get it? By this time, her voice had reached tears. Her next breath came out choppy, as if she was fighting a scream. Yes, I did realize. I screwed up, Patty. I screwed up big time. I was selfish. I took you for granted. I ruined our family. I get it. Every morning I wake up with a daughter who hates me. I walk through a house that feels empty without you. And every night when I go to bed, all I can think about is, no, you fucking don't you dare. No matter how hard Patrick tried to keep his composure, those walls were crumbling. Why couldn't he keep his cool? Why could she still drive him to this state? I dare not. What, Patty? Tell the truth? Why not? You can't handle the truth? She hoped he would grin or chuckle or at least thaw. The movie A Few Good Men was their favorite. They discovered this little tidbit on their first date, made love until the end credits on their second. But that didn't melt him. Quite the opposite. All it did for Patrick was reiterate how much she'd thrown away for some jerk she'd met online. He coldly shot her another look. I'm perfectly fine with the truth. It just sucks when I have to ferret it out because all my wife does is lie to me. Ouch. That broke her. She couldn't hold back the sobs any longer. A sob broke out, and then another. Patrick couldn't help but feel for her. Without sympathizing with her, he felt for her. Even after a year of separation, his heart still beat in the same rhythm as hers. He could picture her there, in the living room they had once shared together. Right now, she was in that old, worn robe she loved so much because it was comfortable and reminded her of her mother. That robe covered her boxers and t-shirt. It was another funny personal joke between them. Whenever he had to go out of town for work, she wore his boxers to bed. It was his way of always keeping pussy safe. I bet when she spent that weekend with the asshole, she wasn't wearing his boxers. He probably wasn't wearing any clothes at all. "I'm so sorry, Patty," she said between sobs. "How many times do I have to say this?" How long will it take for you to finally forgive me?" He said sadly, "I'll forgive you when I finally stop loving you, Kendra. Because maybe then the pain will go away. Maybe then the fucking hole in my chest will go away. Maybe I'll be able to get some sleep without seeing that message where you wrote that you loved him. Maybe..." Now it was Patrick's turn. His pain could no longer be contained. A sob, louder than hers, burst from him. He brought his hand up to his eyes as if it could serve as a dam for tears. Kendra's heart ached with him. She wanted to wrap her arms around him, kiss his forehead, and hold him to her chest as his tears wet her shirt. "Patty! For heaven's sake, stop calling me that!" He suddenly roared into the receiver. She shut up. She had to remember that she couldn't comfort him since she had hurt him herself. It sucked so much, but that was the way it was. That was their reality. "Patrick," she said cautiously, "how long are you going to torture us? Can't you see that you're not just punishing me? You're punishing Jesse and torturing yourself. I know you're mad at me. I get it. That's the way it has to be, but that's why we need marriage counseling. Maybe if we..." Interrupting her, his voice was strangely calm when he said, "But you're with him, Kendra." She was momentarily silent. "I mean, you just said you were going to meet his parents, right? That's a milestone in any relationship. How long after we broke up did you wait until you ran to him? A week? A month?" He paused, and she didn't bother to fill the silence because they both knew she went to see him the very next night. She'd dropped Jesse off at his place because she wanted him to spend time with his daughter. She even made some long, sanctimonious speech congratulating herself for not being one of those heartless bitches who keep a child away from her father. Continuing, he said, "I don't understand you. I can't understand how, after all we've been through, you could think so little of us and so little about me. We've been married 12 years. We both have a 9-year-old daughter. You were by my side at my brother's funeral when he was shot in the line of duty. You hugged me and cried with me. And I was at your mother's funeral when she finally passed away from cancer. After all of this, you not only cheat on me, but you run to him, barely drying the ink on our separation agreement. And now you're calling me and talking about some family counseling? Screw you, Kendra!" Kendra shrieked again. This time had a different effect on Patrick than the last. Yes, Kendra was selfish. She always had been. The fact that Patrick loved her more than she loved him wasn't much of a secret. That didn't mean she didn't love him. No, she did. But the driving force behind their marriage had always been happy wife equals happy life. The two of them didn't even realize it. That is, until it was too late. Patrick was raised to care for his wife more than anyone else. He took pride in being good. He never cheated on his wife. He never raised a hand to her. If they argued, he was quick to apologize, even if he wasn't wrong. After all, if he hurt her feelings, that was enough. Was this the wrong behavior for a man in a marriage? No. Every man should treat his wife as if she was the only woman in the world. But what Patrick failed to do was create balance. He failed to prioritize his desires and feelings. If she wanted something, and it was within reason and budget, she got it. Whatever he wanted, he always gave in. Seeing that smile was payment enough for what he was giving up. But when one person's desires are always sidelined, something happens. It becomes normal. It becomes as if that's the way it should be. If something different happens, it is considered abnormal and therefore wrong. When his brother died, Kendra was by his side. She was at the funeral, cried with him, and genuinely sympathized with her husband. After all, that's what a good wife does. But he had reached a level of depression that she couldn't understand, especially when her own mom died of cancer. It had sucked. She was grieving. She missed her mom every day, but she moved one foot in front of the other and kept going. But there's a difference between someone who dies slowly and someone who is snatched away suddenly. and dying for something you do a little more than just your job. His brother was a cop. He pulled a woman out of a burning car and didn't leave her side until he was sure she was okay. He saved a mother beaten to a pulp by her husband, and on top of that, he drove Sally, his neighbor, to work every day in his patrol car because she was constantly being chased by some young thug who had a soft spot for her. And he got killed for pulling the guy over because his taillight wasn't on. If his brother could die after doing so much good in this world, what chance did he have? He was a nobody, someone who ran an office. The biggest good he had done for the world was recycling. It shook Patrick's world to the core. His brother's death was more than just his brother's death. When he looked into that coffin, he saw himself. If any of them should be dead, it should be him, not a hero to so many people. If anyone needed time on the therapist's couch, it was Patrick. But he refused therapy. He just floundered in his depression, crying silently with the tears of his soul. Kendra didn't understand. Couldn't. He wouldn't talk to her. What he needed from her was something he didn't even realize he needed. He didn't need her to pull him out of this state. He didn't need her to make him feel better or offer him a magical solution to overcome the guilt of staying alive. He just needed her to be there for him. He needed her to stay with him, even when it wasn't possible. But the relationship he'd built early on made his feelings less important. He took a seat in the seat behind her. He was sad, mournful, depressed, and contemplating his own mortality. But he'd been doing it for too long. He needed to come to his senses. Here he had a family who loved him, and that alone should be enough to bring him out of this state. But it wasn't. He needed more than that. He needed to be put first. He needed this time to be all about him. The more upset she got, the more he pulled away. The more he pulled away. "You get the picture." And then Sean showed up. She met him in a chat room. No, this wasn't some innocent chat room where people exchanged recipes and tips for do-it-yourself projects. She went looking for confirmation that she was still attractive, that she was still worth looking at. And she got it. Of course, she wasn't going to cheat. Just a few flirty personal texts, maybe a couple pictures. "Wow, you're beautiful," he texted her. The picture she sent wasn't even that flattering, but he praised her like she was strutting down the runway in the latest issue of Victoria's Secret. From that point on, it's been business as usual. Little flare-ups, more photos, more confirmations, then a bikini picture, giggles, more photos, this time a little more candid. But that was just the beginning. Honestly, if it was just that, she could have rolled over at any time. But it was those phone calls that had her hooked. Those intimate moments she'd stolen from her day to hear his voice, his laugh, his breath. He was no longer a soulless online flirt. He was a real person, a funny, sensitive man who enjoyed listening to her. He always made her laugh. And when she complained about her husband, he was always there to listen and make her feel better. He put her first, just like Patrick used to do. This last 3-day weekend, a lie to end all lies, had been the last breath of her marriage. He knew her mother had cancer. When Kendra suddenly had to visit her, he assumed the worst. Feeling his wife's pain, or at least the pain she should have had, made him snap out of his moping, even if only temporarily. He felt that she needed him. So he tried at the last minute to buy 2 plane tickets to meet her there. He and Jessie were going to be there for her in her time of need, but she had told him not to. She was adamant about that. In fact, she said the strangest thing, namely, "This is something I need to do alone." Who wants to go through this alone? Who wouldn't want their spouse there with them, even if just for moral support? But later, when her mom died, did she need him for that? That was the beginning of his suspicions. He began to pay more attention to her phone activity, the way it went everywhere with her, including the bathroom, the way she was putting the phone face down, the way she would turn it slightly away from him when she was texting, or the way she sometimes left the room when the phone rang. And then, one day, she'd left it at home by mistake. Curious, he'd tried to open it, only to find that she'd changed her password since their anniversary. Previously, it had been her 4-digit code for most PINs, her debit and credit cards, her banking information, her voicemail, but not anymore. And then, as she rushed back in panic to retrieve it, the alarm bells rang loudly. The look in her eyes, the fear, was almost a confession in itself, but he needed proof. So he watched her closely, pretending not to notice anything. He watched until one day he saw her unlock it. The new code was 4 digits that didn't match anything he knew, so he had to repeat it to himself over and over to memorize it. He would later find out that it was Sean's birthday. Patrick looked at the clock on the wall. It was 12:15. It was officially Christmas. "Well, it's Christmas already, Kendra," he said, feeling incredibly drained after such a short conversation. She sniffed her nose. "Yes, I guess it is." Both seemed reluctant to end the conversation. It was actually a metaphor for everything else. That's why they were still apart, but neither of them had filed for divorce yet. Even with the fact that she was going to meet Sean's parents today, she couldn't bring herself to file. Part of her, even though it was a drawn-out thing, was hoping for a Christmas miracle. She hoped he would tell her he couldn't live without her and that he was coming home to her. If Patrick did that, she would gladly cut Sean out of her life. Unfortunately, what she didn't realize was that it was that very train of thought that kept her from making a Christmas miracle happen. What she failed to realize was that the more she refused to put him first, the more he drifted away from her. They were at an impasse. Patrick still loved his wife, no matter how much he struggled with that love. Her infidelity still hurt, but it no longer incapacitated him as it once had. Once, every waking moment had been consumed by her and those texts. But lately, he found himself spending days without thinking about it, today being an exception. Soon it would be weeks. And then she'll just be the mother of his child, someone he once knew. This purgatory won't last forever. "Merry Christmas, Kendra," Patrick said, and you know what? He really thought so. "I hope you find what you're looking for." She sighed sadly. She wouldn't get her Christmas miracle, not this year, maybe next year. "Merry Christmas, Patrick." She swallowed the words. "I love you." She knew he wouldn't say the same back to her, even if he felt it. She missed those words flying off his lips. No matter how many times Sean repeated them, it didn't compare. Patrick had been her first love, her best friend, her soulmate. This was truly her loss. The click of the call ending made Kendra break down again. What she wouldn't give to go back in time 5 Christmases ago to the time she'd given him that chair. Were these two talking about me? Emily, my pregnant and outgoing assistant, was taking Brandy, my replacement, around the office, introducing her. Heading up an all-female accounting department, I jokingly referred to myself as a typical male. Mindful of the #MeToo movement and sexual harassment in general, I always kept my distance from the 15 women who make up the department. So, unless Emily was talking about another man, she must have been referring to me, Ed Black, 34, sandy-colored hair and skinny. There's kind of a two-way stick in the word nice guy, isn't there? On one hand, it means someone who is pleasant to be around, who does the right thing and watches his manners. However, especially when the term is used by women, it often carries a connotation of weakness, a bit of weakness. I wondered feverishly if my wife agreed. Whenever in our 12 years together, whenever we had to decide, for example, where to eat, I let her choose. Same with where to go on vacation. Those things mattered far less to me than being with her and our 2 girls, ages 8 and 10. Same thing with work. Don't let anyone tell you that accounting isn't hard and fast. There are many ways to freshen up the numbers, and before making decisions, I always listen to the people who have to live with those decisions day in and day out. Rarely did I just force a decision on them. So, yes, I could understand Emily's description of me. However, I was curious about the context. Did she say I was a nice guy, in a complimentary or derogatory way? So I did what a wimp would do. I stopped, lurked, and eavesdropped. A bad move, and in hindsight, probably a mistake. With a note of disapproval in her voice, Emily continued. One thing you should know about and protect him from is his wife Melinda, who is cheating on him with our CFO Horace Gregson. She usually calls her husband around 11 a few days a week, ostensibly to say hello, but really she's checking to see if he'll stay in the office while Horace comes over to their house. If I told him, it would break his heart. I can't do that to him because he's such a good guy. There was silence as my new assistant obviously took the news stunningly. Emily obviously thought I was a wuss, cute of course, but a wuss nonetheless. Did she really think I would break down and melt when I learned that my 33-year-old brown-eyed brunette had become a cheating whore? Was she trying to protect our esteemed CFO? What the hell? I silently backed away and returned, coughing slightly to announce my approach. Ladies, is Emily filling you in on all the gossip and intrigue surrounding the palace? Both laughed a little nervously, and Brandy said, You seem to have a competent and dedicated staff. And since she's leaving, she didn't even need to gild the lilies. I'm looking forward to taking the reins tomorrow and working with the team. I smiled. Our CPA firm has hired a new IT person and I have to go meet with him. I probably won't be back. So, I'll see you tomorrow, no training. Emily, remember Friday at Bangers. Our department had a farewell party planned after hours. I didn't have to meet any of the new IT guys. I stopped at a mall a block from my office and called Simon, my older brother and best buddy. We need to talk, like right now. He tried to add a little humor. Hey, buddy, you're not my wife. Which you can be thankful for. How soon can you get home? It's an emergency. Shit, all right, bro. I'm on my way. 2 years ago, his best friend got cheated on, and I wanted the contact info for the private investigator he hired to nail the bitch. That was my official reason. Unspoken was my need for a brotherly hug. After our parents died, he was my only family and the only person on the planet I could trust. I rang his doorbell and his clearly concerned wife, Sandy, opened it. After a brief hug, she said, Come in. Simon's on his way. How's it going? Let's wait until he gets here. Then I only have to tell everything once. Is it that bad? Blue moon while we wait? About 10 minutes later, we heard the garage door open and Simon came out of the garage. After the requisite brotherly hug, we moved into the living room. I heard less than an hour ago Melinda was cheating with my boss, in my bed. The only sound in the stunned silence was my sobbing. Holy shit, Simon said. I can't believe it. Sandy followed him. Neither can I, Sandy, I added, shaking my head. Are you sure? With a sigh, I raised my hands with palms up. Until I see it with my own eyes, I can't be sure, but I am. What are you gonna do? I don't know. Murder? Suicide? Murder-suicide? Any suggestions? Hey, bro, slow the bus down. There's gotta be a better way to respond. I learned from Derek's divorce that there's no fault in our state. That means you can divorce Mel's ass without proof or reason. You just say you want a divorce, divide the assets, and move on with your life. So you don't need proof or anything like that. Just walk away and move on. I almost screamed in horror. What? Simon, behave yourself. Ed's in pain. Do you love Melinda? Sandy handed me a box of tissues. Hell yeah, if it weren't for that, I would have easily kicked her ass and moved on. I thought we were good. It felt like my heart had been ripped out and gutted with a butcher's axe. All of her subtle outbursts over the past few months suddenly make sense. Her new hero has everything I need. He's younger, smarter, more attractive, richer. As far as I know, he has a bigger tool, and of course he has a position above mine. Why make do with an underling when you can have the boss? Shit. Simon straightened up and put on a business-like air. All right, then you'll have to confront her. But you can only do that with hard evidence. If you challenge her now, she'll do the politician's dance. Deny, deny, deny. And humiliate you further by saying you're an insecure little weenie. All I could do was nod. I wasn't even angry yet. I was just stunned, devastated, and most importantly, hurt. This was a woman I would have given my life for, and her gratitude for it was like this? Continuing, Simon asked, Do you still have baby monitors? Yes, but they're in the basement somewhere, and it'll take a year to find them. All right, Ed. Time to go shopping. Sandy, do you want us to pick up a pizza on the way back? Thanks, but I'm making spaghetti casserole. Good luck. Simon's experience with his buddy's divorce manifested itself in the places we shopped and the things we bought. When I got home, I left everything in the trunk and played daddy as usual. The kids yapped and chattered as usual, and we helped Mom clean up the kitchen and run the dishwasher. Then I took my time going over the girls' homework while Melinda retired to our bedroom. After the girls read their stories and fell asleep, I went to my home office and sat down at the computer. Melinda, who handled accounts receivable for the office supply company we used, had her own nook in the kitchen, though she never brought work home and used her phone for almost everything. I Googled divorce until I was dizzy. The more I read, the more my shock turned to anger. Melinda's selfishness hurt wildly, and they accuse men of thinking with their little heads, and what was she thinking? Around 10, when we usually go to bed, the bitch peeked into my office. "You going to bed? How did she do that?" Her voice was as loving and casual as it was every day. The smile on her face matched the loving look in her eyes. How long had she spread her legs in front of my boss? And why in front of him specifically? Okay, he had more money and other things, but he had a family too. 3 kids. What did my Melinda see in him that made her jeopardize our lives and happiness? I just didn't understand it. "No, I have something I'm working on. I won't be long, but I need to finish it." "Okay. Good night." She gave me a kiss and left. When did this happen? In all these years, neither of us had ever sent each other a kiss in our house. We always walked over and kissed each other on the lips. Mentally, I slapped myself on the forehead. When was the last time I took her out for a nice dinner, not on Valentine's Day or something where it was expected? Slap, slap, slap. I was taking her for granted. Of course, she was taking me for granted too, but I wasn't controlling what I could. I'm gonna have to fix that. If I wanted us to stay together, would we? To determine that, I needed to know more. After an hour, I suspected she'd fallen asleep, so I quietly snuck into the kitchen, took her phone off the charging stand, opened it, and looked through her contacts. No Horace Gregson. But I saw a Ganna Gentry I didn't know, and my heart sank inside me. She just spoofed a woman using the same initials. Dozens of emails, many using our company's email server. I copied them all to my personal email account. Setting up a clone on my phone, I checked her text messages. Same thing. About 4 months ago, as far as I could tell in the limited time I had. Again, I copied everything, which took a long time. Then I went back and deleted all traces of my actions. When I was done, I put her phone back, turned off the light, and went back to my office. The next day, I faked a cough and sounded sick. After everyone left, I started going through emails and text messages, which was slow going. Apparently, they hooked up at my company's last Christmas party. I noticed that the 2 of them were socializing, but no more than spouses usually do on such occasions. However, judging from the emails, something clicked, especially with Melinda. Horace was what I would call a typical flirtatious man, but Melinda's responses were dangerously close to the edge of acceptability. She had become a patron of our town's art museum, and he, at her insistence, had as well. I never paid attention to Melinda's sudden interest in art and, frankly, was grateful that she kept me out of it. She told me that she had been asked to volunteer on the finance committee, and since she had regular contact with many doctors, the barely voiced idea was that as a woman she could get more of them to donate. However, I learned from emails and text messages that she had not joined any committee except the Horace Dick Admiration Committee, which rotated between the Hilton, Marriott, and Westin hotels, apparently to avoid establishing a pattern. Until they had the brilliant idea to save money by desecrating our marriage bed. Damn it. Sneaky, lying slut. But, the trail involved something more nefarious than date nights and nude photos. Horace, I learned, was skimming money from our company and using Melanie to do it. A light bulb went off in my head. Horace's flirting and seduction of my wife had nothing to do with her sex appeal. After enticing her with an endless stream of flattery and several dates where he went out of his way to bring her to bliss, he had romanticized the idea of the 2 of them leaving their spouses and disappearing with a few stolen millions to live an idyllic life with no problems and only caring about what positions to add to their sexual repertoire. At first, Melinda treated the idea as a joke. He didn't push it, but waited for her greed and narcissism to do everything for him. He had apparently set up a company in the Cayman Islands, where else, with a proper bank account. Apparently, she started using fake invoices to bill our company, which he authorized for direct payment to the Cayman Islands bank account. Not only was I shocked at the blatant criminality of this, but what really pissed me off was that he was using my department, most likely to blame it all on my alleged incompetence if it was discovered. Furious indignation in no way described my reaction. The bastard had set me up to go to jail while he himself stole my wife. Seeing his plan from afar, I doubted he'd take her with him. Honestly, Melinda is a remarkable woman, or should I say was, but she could hardly be called stunning anymore. After 2 childbirths and not so intense exercise, she still had a few unwieldy pounds. Her complexion was pale, and time was unbeatable in its wrinkle-painting campaign. She no doubt knew this, which might explain the readiness with which she gave in to his flattery. In that case, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Horace decided to dump the loser's wife or maybe even kill her when he absconded with the millions she'd helped him collect. I snorted. Not on me, you cheating asshole. What could I have done? Who could I talk to? The only lawyer I knew was our company's corporate lawyer. Sure, he should have been brought in, but if I just approached him, the first thing he'd do would be to run to Horace, handing him a knife to kill and bury me, career-wise, if not literally. I called Simon again. Dude, things are getting tense. I took the day off, and you should too. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but we need to talk about serious crime, life and death. Meet me at the Horse and Trough, now. Okay, but it better be something serious and not just a crybaby session. Taking a booth, I laid out a long and convoluted plot. Whistling, he leaned back in his chair. I take back my comment about whininess. Apology accepted, I said. I need the name of a divorce lawyer shark and a corporate lawyer shark. The first one is easy. Brenda Hawkins makes every divorce lawyer tremble, but I have no idea about the second one. Well, let's start with her, and maybe she knows someone who swims in the same waters. After several meetings with attorneys, Miss Hawkins called the FBI's white-collar crime unit, who took the initiative. They had the means to trace all the accounts and their numbers, but it didn't happen quickly. Fortunately, they had solid evidence that I was to be the innocent framed victim, not the perpetrator. That was a huge relief. One morning, our doorbell rang one morning. Distracted by the morning rush, Melinda opened it. Melinda Black? Yes, how can I help you? I'm Special Agent Hubert Farram, and you're under arrest for... And he went on with an impressive list of heinous white-collar crimes and her Miranda rights. Luckily, she was dressed for work, so she didn't have to go to the police station in her pajamas. Honey, this is a huge misunderstanding. Can you arrange a lawyer and bail for me? Looking at her coldly, I just said, No, call your buddy Horace. He's got more money. A bomb of hysteria went off as she swore, yelled, and squealed at me, accusing me of things I'd never even heard of. The agent looked at me with a strange, puzzled expression, as if I was some kind of ogre for not supporting my woman. With a simple shrug, I explained. She's cheating on me with my boss, and the two of them are stealing money from our company, planning to pin it all on me while they flee the country with their stolen millions. Melinda immediately stopped her cat howl, shocked at the calmness with which I had uncovered their conspiracy. What she doesn't know is that once all the money is secured and transferred elsewhere, he plans to kill her and keep all the money for himself. He has another whore in Costa Rica who is happy without the money, just with him. That last part I just made up and added to torture her. To say Melinda was shocked would be an understatement, and she unleashed another stream of protests and insults. I just waved the agent and the arrested woman off and closed the door. Epilogue. The FBI, local cops, and the company owner worked together to get all the facts. They had the company phones tapped, so there was no problem convicting my boss and wife. She got 3 years and he got 12. My wife and I got an easy divorce, as did Gregson's wife and his ass. It took me over a year to get over losing my love and getting stabbed in the back. I helped Gregson's wife a lot, not sexually, but with conversation. All of our 5 children got along well. We both appreciated having someone to talk to. However, nature being what it is, talking eventually led to more of the same, because I'm such a nice guy. The prom was 2 months away, and I was getting ready to ask Tracy to be my date for the prom. I know some guys ask their girlfriends 3 months in advance, but I didn't need to because Tracy was my girlfriend. Always been my girlfriend. And prom was a done deal. Hell, prom had been a done deal since I turned 5. Tracy Batson and I were neighbors, since her family moved next door to mine when I was 5 and she was 4. We met a few days after the family moved in. I was playing alone in the backyard when I noticed someone running toward me. I got up just in time when she reached me, a short-cropped blonde girl with green eyes and freckles all over her face. She reached out to me and hugged me tightly. I let her do it. When we uncoupled, she knelt down next to me and started playing with my Tonka trucks. That was it. No fanfare. Best friends forever. Tracy and I didn't play together every day. Sometimes she went off to play with the girls. Sometimes I went off to play with the boys. But most of the time we played with Tracy, me and the others when they showed up. I was well aware that she was a girl, but for some reason I never looked at her the same way I looked at the other girls. Sometimes the other girls had lice. I don't know why, but Tracy never had it. We remained best friends through elementary, middle, and high school. While other boys and girls were starting to pair up, Tracy and I were already a couple. Other couples were going on dates, and Tracy and I were just doing something together. It wasn't a date. We were just doing what we'd always done. I was 14 and she was 13 when we had our first kiss. And like everything else for us, it was done lightly and without fanfare. We were coming out of an evening movie theater. I put my arm around her waist. She snuggled up to me and we kissed. It was nothing special for the two of us, though I knew we both felt something electric. We kissed many more times after that. Our parents seemed to take everything for granted. I was part of her family and she was part of mine. I could count on being yelled at or spanked if I misbehaved in her house, and the same was true of her if she misbehaved in mine. Our friends also took our relationship calmly, perhaps because it seemed like we were always together. In the neighborhood, it was clear that we were together, and no one tried to come between us. Outside the neighborhood, it was different, and Tracy had guys running after her. She was developed in all the right places, and while I was always worried that she would find someone she wanted more than me, I never worried too much because we were we. She was mine, and I was hers. End of story. At least I thought so. As always, after class ended, Tracy met me at my car in the parking lot. As we drove home, I looked away and asked where she wanted to go after graduation. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. 15. This was not good. I pulled off to the side of the road as soon as I could find an open spot. Pulling over, I put the car in park and turned my full attention to Tracy, who had started crying and looked like she had just eaten a bag of lemons. I already told Justin Morrow that I was going to the prom with him, Stevie, Tracy whispered. My breath caught for a second. I shook my head in disbelief, then looked straight into Tracy's eyes. He invited me over last month. I thought it would be fun to go with someone else. You know, a different guy, a different perspective. You know, there's always me and you. What's the big deal? Ah! I thought my head was going to explode. What's going on, Tracy? Another perspective? You gotta be kidding me. She burst into tears. I started to reach out to her to comfort her, but then common sense hit me over the head. We are an us, Tracy. We are we. I screamed. You're my girlfriend. My girlfriend wouldn't go to prom with another guy just for another prospect. Look, Stevie, I've never dated another guy, and you've never dated another girl. You know you're going away to college in a few months, and we're both going to have to date other people. At least, Tracy, why didn't you wait until I was gone? That would have been kind-hearted at the very least. Tracy mumbled something, sobbing. I wasn't even listening, turning on the transmission and driving us home. At home, I grumbled for 4 days. I didn't go home to Tracy, and she didn't come home to me. Both parents weren't born yesterday. I found out from Joyce that Tracy was going to the prom with Justin Morrow. Joyce cried, telling me that, Stevie. Anything you want to add? Mom asked at dinner on the 4th day. Dad raised both eyebrows. My little sister Ellie fidgeted in her chair. Only that you and Joyce can stop making wedding plans for us. We're sorry, Stevie, we really are. You know, if you need to talk, Dad said. Does anyone need 2 tickets to the prom? I asked, trying to sound like I was joking. Justin Morrow was more of an acquaintance than a friend. I had no idea if he knew Tracy and I were a couple, but it didn't matter. If Tracy was really mine, she would have told Justin about it, not consented. I went around moping for a couple weeks, and then as I was getting out of my car one day after school, I heard Allison Warnock giggling about something with a few of her friends. Allison was the younger sister of Laura Warnock, who lived across the street from me and hung out with a common group of friends in the neighborhood. Laura had been friends with me for about as long as Tracy had been, and was probably Tracy's second best friend after me. At least until 3 weeks ago. Allison was a freshman at our high school, about 6'3", skinny as a rail, blonde hair, and completely adorable. I'd known Allison since I was 2 years old, and we'd always gotten along great. She was a bit of a weirdo and reckless, and was often my partner when we'd have chicken fights on the lawn or in the pool, and she'd sit on my shoulders. She was so light that I could carry her with one arm, which gave me the opportunity to use my free hand to wrestle, knocking our team to a distinct advantage. In any case, I'd never really seen Allison as anything more than a skinny, flat-chested sissy until now, but I'll admit I'd always had a special place for my chicken wrestling partner. Hell, I already had tickets, so I made a somewhat awkward request. I pulled her away from the twins, another pair of 15-year-olds from our neighborhood, and simply asked her to be my date. Her alabaster face turned bright pink and she lowered her eyes to the ground. I knew I'd caught her off guard. "Shouldn't you ask my sister since you're not going with Tracy? You've always been one of her closest friends," she said, raising her gaze to my face at the last second. "No, I have to ask the Warnock girl I really want to go with, which is you, even if there are no chicken fights at prom. I'm not asking you to be Tracy's replacement. I'm asking you to be my friend." "Can I ask Mom and Dad first? I'd like to go, but until I turn 16, Dad says I have to ask permission." "Oh yeah, I don't want Big Ed to be mad at me," I replied. Allison's father, Big Ed, was a bear, 6 foot 100 pounds, and no sane person would want him mad at him. But as much as I feared Big Ed, I knew that the real strength in the family was Allison's mother, Barbara, who was a full-blown Irish Catholic, the kind of woman everyone read about in legends. God forbid the boy should touch any of her daughters. Barbara would surely rip off both his ears and scratch out both his eyes. That evening, the phone rang, but not to me. Barb called directly to her boss. My mom and I heard Mom assure Barb in great detail that I would be a complete gentleman. When Mom gives her word, that's how it goes, which was fine with me. The next morning, before I could even get to my locker, Laura was already in my face and scolding me. "What the hell, Stevie? Am I chopped liver? We've been friends forever, spent half our time together, and you're inviting my little sister to prom? What's wrong?" Laura practically yelled at me. I held up my hands in a sign of surrender. "Up until a few weeks ago, I was sure I was going to the prom with Tracy, but I guess I was wrong," I said. "After she figuratively kicked me in the balls, I wasn't going to go at all. Then I decided I was going to go, but just for fun, with no strings attached." Allison makes me laugh, and I want to laugh. We'll go and have fun, and then I'll graduate and go to school. Laura let out a small shriek, and then inhaled about half of the oxygen in the hallway while everyone watched us. She looked at me intently and then snorted. I looked at everyone looking at me, shrugged, and went to my first class of the day. I think I lost 2 friends. Graduation was as good as I could have hoped for. Allison looked stunning in her navy blue dress, with her hair styled and wearing makeup for the first time. I never once had the urge to throw her on my shoulders for a chicken fight, but definitely had the urge to pull her close to me for a slow dance, which I did. By the second dance, she was nestled against my body, and so we danced for the rest of the evening. Yes, I saw Tracy and Justin from afar a few times during the evening. Yes, she looked lovely in a rather body-hugging green dress, and truth be told, Justin looked rather solid in a black suit. When I saw them, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Truth be told, I didn't try to pay attention to Tracy and Justin because I really enjoyed spending time with Allison. She was both fun, funny, and sexy in a skinny chick kind of way. A few times I thought she was going to turn into a real heartbreaker in the next year or so. I almost wished I could stay here to see that prediction come true. We went to a very late breakfast at a local IHOP with a few other couples, then I drove us home. I parked in front of my house and walked her across the street to the front porch. Then I mustered up the courage to give her a real goodnight kiss, with a little tongue action before she hugged me tighter and ran her tongue over mine. We did it a second time after that, until I heard a rustling outside the Warnock's door and decided I should take the hint and walk home. The following Saturday morning after prom night, Tracy walked into my house as she had done for years until 2 months ago. My mom and I looked at each other in surprise as Tracy walked over to the couch in the family room and pulled herself over to me. She sat in silence for about a minute while we watched Premier League soccer and then whispered in my ear that we needed to talk on the back patio. I protested, but caught the look on my mom's face and realized I should follow Tracy outside. "Don't you think this has gone on long enough, Stevie? Graduation has been over for a week now and you're still not talking to me? Like I told you, it was a one-time thing. I dated someone else and so did you, although I have to say, you surprised me with your choice. You certainly didn't make Laura happy." "I wasn't trying to make Laura happy. I was trying to make myself happy," I grumbled. "Okay, you made yourself happy, I guess, but now it's time to get back to normal. I'm back, I'm yours, and you're mine," I said. "At least until the next time you decide to take a break from me," I interrupted. Tracy looked embarrassed. "I can't say I didn't enjoy prom, but I'm over it. We're back to being us again, Stevie," she said. "No, Tracy, we'll never be us again," I said. "You're done with us forever." "Don't be like that, Stevie," Tracy replied, holding back tears. I got up from the chair, went into the house, grabbed my car keys, and left. An hour later, after Tracy gave up and went home, my mom texted me. Over the summer, until I left for college, I went out with Allison a few times. We always had fun, but we were both realistic. I had 4 years of college ahead of me, and she had 3 years of high school. We agreed that we'd be better off going our separate ways, though we didn't rule out casual dates in the summer when I'd be home. A little after New Year's Eve, I got a call from Tracy's school. It was her senior year and prom. She was calling to let me know that she was making amends for ruining my prom and that I could invite her to prom this year. "It's a generous offer," I told her, "but I'm just not ready for it." I suggested that maybe Justin was available. Since they had a good time last year, maybe they should do it again. She quietly hung up the phone. Over the summer, when I was home, Tracy would occasionally come over to me and make snide remarks that we should get back together. She even hinted to both of my parents that she and I should get back together. This also explains why I had to endure an hour-long lecture from her mother about how good we were together, and that I was wrong to not see the forest for the trees. Of course, because of our whole history with Tracy's mom, I was polite, but I still couldn't give her an answer that would make her happy. For his part, Tracy's dad couldn't look me in the eye. I think he agreed with my position, but didn't want to say it out loud. I knew that Allison had had her share of dating, eventually turning into a real stunning beauty when she finally got in shape and had small but firm breasts. I went on dates too, since I'm a pretty decent guy with a healthy sex drive. I tracked Allison enough to know that she didn't have a steady boyfriend in the middle of her senior year, so when I was home for Christmas, I asked her if she wanted me to be with her for prom. She smiled broadly and said, "Yes." 3 years had made Allison's body and mind more mature, but even though she had grown into a real hot babe, she never let her beauty overshadow her fun-loving personality. We had a great time at the prom, and an even better time afterward as we got to know each other better for the first time. Hoping for that outcome, I booked a hotel room, but I wasn't about to push Allison into it. We started the evening as great friends, and just like 3 years ago, Allison pressed her whole body against me every time we hit the dance floor. Her lips tasted delicious, and we spent quite a bit of time kissing. Toward the end of the night, I asked if she wanted to have some more fun with her friends, or if she wanted to go to the hotel with me. She didn't seem surprised or upset that I'd gotten us a room. I had a bottle of champagne and a container of strawberries in the room. We took our time in bed, kissing, joking, laughing, and talking. I don't know how long we did that until we were in front of the bed, where I carefully began to remove her burgundy silk and lace dress. As I slowly stripped her down to her burgundy bra and panties, she looked nothing like the skinny, tomboyish girl I remembered as a 12-year-old kid. We snuggled quietly against each other for a while before we started talking and laughing again. We got dressed and left, and I brought Allison home by 1:45 a.m., 15 minutes ahead of Big Ed's deadline for that night. Allison and I were together for the summer after her graduation, but drifted apart again when she left for her freshman year of college in Iowa, and I left for my senior year of college in Indiana. We emailed occasionally, and although we remained great friends, we both knew we were going in different directions. I was graduating college in May, and she had 3 more years of school ahead of her. They say timing is everything, and our timing just didn't seem to match up. I had to give Tracy credit for her persistence. She kept her finger on the pulse of the game with periodic emails, gently reminding me that she would drop everything in a heartbeat if I just said the word. I politely reminded her that our ships had parted at night, and we both had our own lives. I got a good job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Ohio and started studying for my master's degree, thinking I wanted to be a college professor someday. I know that sounds arcane, but I really enjoyed communicating with people through math. While taking college courses, I interacted with many female students, and my social life was shaping up more in that direction than any other until Molly entered my world and pulled me out of my meager existence. Molly was a divorced woman with a child who had recently started working in the audit department at my firm. With long, bright orange hair, freckles everywhere, and skin whiter than white, she was a perfect redhead. She also had big breasts and captivating green eyes that I didn't notice until one day during a birthday party in the office break room when she spilled hot coffee on my shirt. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Coffee and cake for a coworker in the break room. Apparently, she took her cake a little before I did, but as she turned to walk away from the table, the square of cake she had just taken flew off her plate, and in an attempt to stop it, she jerked her left hand to the side, creating a splatter that hit my chest. It hurt like hell, that I remember, but when I looked up, I was lost in those green eyes, and suddenly I stopped feeling pain. It wasn't until another coworker rushed over to me with paper towels and started blotting it up that I felt the touch again and cried out in pain. Molly immediately started apologizing, and I left to go to the bathroom. An hour later, those mesmerizing green eyes appeared in my office with another piece of cake, and in another 5 minutes I had a date for the following Friday evening. I have to admit I was shocked when I rang Molly's doorbell on Friday night, and it was opened by a teenager with red hair. He had to be at least 16 years old, which meant Molly was probably older than I'd realized. Not that I was put off by her age, but I was surprised when she admitted that she was 42. She later told me that she had been married for 16 years and divorced for 4 years. She looked gorgeous in what I would call Mom's version of the infamous little black dress, as it was a couple of inches above her knees and revealed just a hint of her large breasts. I tried not to be too conspicuous because I knew her son was watching me. Perhaps because Molly was raising a teenager, she seemed very knowledgeable about the world of youth despite her age. It took me about 5 minutes to come to terms with it all, but after that it seemed just like any other date I'd ever had. We enjoyed a delicious meal and then went to a concert organized by the local Philharmonic. Not the wildest date I've ever been on, but good enough that I knew I wanted to try more. Maybe it had to do with her age, but I was a little timid about making a sexual move on Molly. She was certainly sexy enough, but something about her intimidated me, to say the least. However, she clearly noticed that something was off, and on our 6th date, she broached the subject. We had a bourbon and barbecue night and then went to a country western dance club for some dancing. Neither of us had ever danced before, but we had a great time learning from the veterans at the club. I held on to Molly all night, and I knew she was picking up the vibe of the night. But I was once again agonizing over how I should start when Molly put her hands behind my head and pulled me to her for a heated kiss. "I know my age bothers you, Stevie, but I'm not going to break the buzz. We have to end this night horizontal," Molly whispered. An embarrassed smile spread across my face from ear to ear. I took her hand and led her out of the club. Even though Molly was the oldest woman I'd ever slept with, she was incredibly energetic and knew how to use her experience. About a year later, a wedding invitation came in the mail and made me slow down dramatically. It turned out that Allison had graduated from college about a year before and was getting married to someone she had dated her senior year of college. We stopped texting and I lost sight of her. She was now living in Illinois, but the wedding was to be held in New York, where her parents still lived. I took Molly with me and explained how everyone fit into this neighborhood celebration, because that's how it really was. My parents, Big Ed, Barb, and Laura, Tracy and her parents were there. Drew Goldstein seemed like a nice enough guy, but it took a lot of internal reflection for me to be happy for Allison. I never got over my feelings for her, but that's just not meant to be. Shit happens, You have to move on. That said, I probably didn't make either Allison or Drew happy when she first introduced him to me a couple days before the wedding. We had that history, and I was probably as close to an older brother as she was to accepting me as such. "I'm very happy for you, Drew, but hear me out, and hear me out carefully," I said sharply, keeping a smile on my face. "If you offend her, I'll break your nose. Got it?" Both Allison and Drew seemed a little stunned by my statement. Drew had the good sense to nod understandingly as I shook his hand. Later, Laura told me that Big Ed approved of my threat. Tracy had apparently finally forgotten about me. She showed up with her husband in tow and a pregnancy belly. He looked like he stepped out of a 60s biker movie, and neither Joyce nor Tim Batson looked very pleased. Tracy and I hardly spoke all weekend, but when we did talk, we were polite. Molly and I never sought exclusivity, and I knew she was seeing others while I preferred not to. We never discussed others until a few months after Allison's wedding, when Molly cooked a sumptuous Irish dinner and told me she had news for me. Turns out she's been dating a nice guy a couple years older than herself for most of the time she's been dating me, and he's been talking about exclusivity. She decided she had to let me know this information. I wasn't completely surprised by that statement and certainly couldn't blame her if she wanted to go for a more secure relationship. Besides, the two of them probably had more in common. She started to show emotion and seemed to even apologize, but I gently stopped her. "Never apologize for doing what's right for you, baby," I said. "You've always been completely upfront and honest with me. If you want a commitment and he can give it and I can't, that's on me. You are a beautiful woman and a beautiful soul. I hope everything works out wonderfully for you two. I really meant what I said." I got up from the table, kissed her very gently on the cheek, and left. In a conversation about 5 years later, my mom broke the somewhat sad news of Allison's divorce. I say somewhat sad because, truth be told, I still had some feelings for the woman, but really, it's always sad when someone's marriage goes down. From my perspective, you marry someone thinking it's going to be a lifelong commitment, and when it turns out not to be, it's devastating. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't try to contact her because we didn't keep in touch. I was more than surprised when I got a text from Allison 6 months later. It said, "Are you still there?" I guessed that she wasn't sure if I still had the same phone number. I was very surprised to see who the message was from, but I didn't respond to it for about 3 days. Eventually, I replied with a meaningless reply, "Yes." Another 3 days passed before I got a call one evening. "Got a few minutes for an old friend?" she asked. "I really need to spend some time with a non-relative or friend who is trying to cheer me up. I know we haven't socialized much over the years, but you've always been honest with me and made me laugh. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a good laugh. Not being a beautiful woman, I didn't realize how hard Allison had it in the years since our breakup. In college and beyond, she was always picking out a date, being invited to all sorts of events and outings. And it must have been exhausting. When she married Drew, the handsome son of a prominent financier from Illinois, it seemed like the good times would last forever, as they both got good jobs with his father's company and enjoyed a very comfortable life in a new home in the Chicago suburbs. Things took a turn for the worse when she found out that Drew had been cheating on her for at least a year with the daughter of an old family friend. I agreed to go to Chicago for a long weekend to give her a shoulder to lean on. I know she sounded upset on the phone, but was shocked when she showed up at the door of her apartment in a bad part of town. She looked like she hadn't eaten or showered in days, and her eyes seemed hunted. "What happened to my little chicken wrestling friend? She looked like crap." Sure enough, my mouth dropped open, and then she started crying. Like most guys, I get completely lost in the presence of a crying woman. All I could do was hug Allison and walk her back to the apartment. We spent the next 2 hours on the shabby couch while she sobbed into my shirt and confusedly recounted her grief. After finding out about the affair, Allison kicked Drew out of the house, but then Drew's father got involved. Allison didn't read the prenup she signed with Drew, and 9 months later, Allison was divorced and living in that apartment, with no job and almost no life. Drew's father made sure that his HR department destroyed any chance Allison had of getting a good job in the area, and she worked at a dry cleaner's. Friday night and all day Saturday, Allison and I talked a lot. As soon as I got to her apartment, we hugged, but after that, the most physical thing we did was occasionally hold hands while we talked. It just didn't feel right. I was also uncomfortable seeing Allison so broken and the way her life was turning out. I needed to give her a clean break, so I turned to the only man I knew who cared about Allison more than I did. I explained the situation to Big Ed as I understood it, and he promised that he and Barb would be in Chicago the next morning to take Allison home to upstate New York. When I broke the news to Allison, she almost ripped my ears off, but I knew it was the right move. As I helped her pack her meager belongings, she still called me every name she knew. "I'm a 30-year-old woman. I don't need to be treated like a 5-year-old girl, asshole," was one of the nicest things she said to me while I was helping her pack on Monday. I kept in touch with Allison weekly through Big Ed and Barb. Allison steadfastly refused to talk to me. My life went on. I dated several women, including one for almost a year. I was close to asking her the big question when she told me she had met someone she wanted to date and didn't want to cheat on me, so we were required to break up. I told her I appreciated her honesty and returned my deposit for the engagement ring I bought. About 6 months after sending Allison back to New York, I took a couple days off and went to Chicago for the weekend. Did some homework and waited outside Drew Goldstein's Mercedes when he got off work Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. When I approached him in the parking lot, he didn't seem to remember me right away, but as soon as I took my seat, I saw a spark of recognition flash in his eyes. But he no longer had time to raise his arms, and I attacked him with all the strength I had in my 6'3", 82-pound body. I felt his nose explode, and blood splattered everywhere as he fell to the ground. "I warned you what would happen if you hurt Allison. Apparently you forgot. I haven't," I said quietly. Interestingly, even though there were a lot of people in the parking lot who saw me hitting Drew, not one made a move to help him or stop me from leaving. I guess the boss's son just wasn't popular. Just a few hours later, I was back in Indiana, still expecting the police to show up at my door because of my attack on Drew, and I was surprised when that didn't happen. I was also surprised 2 weeks later when I got a call from Allison. "A little birdie told me that a couple weeks ago you gave Drew a nose job," Allison said. "I thought you were just being a jerk for threatening him all those years. Now I don't know how to thank you. By the way, Dad said he'd send you a bottle of 18-year-old Glenmorangie." I had a different suggestion for how Allison could thank me, and I took a week's vacation to help her with that. We spent most of that week together, and by the time I left to return to Indiana, we had become a monogamous couple, but long distance. We lived long distance for about 6 months, after which she came to live with me in Indiana. Big Ed and Barb weren't totally agreeable to those terms, but given our history, gave us some leeway. That only lasted about a year, however, as 2 months later, Allison accepted my marriage proposal, and 10 months after that, we were married. I love irony, so we were married exactly 17 years from the day of our first date. My high school graduation. Epilogue. It may have taken us a long time to be together, but as they say, good things are worth waiting for. Allison and I had just celebrated our 30th anniversary at a party thrown by our children, Eddie and Rosalie, and their spouses. It wasn't always perfect, but it was as close as I probably deserve. By the way, we get a Christmas card from Tracy every year. She has a 4th husband and 4 children who are now 25 years old. Although I didn't know it at the time, someone upstairs was looking out for me.